I'm a preacher's kid. My dad's been a pastor as long as I can remember. He just retired after 40 years of ministry a couple of years ago. And then after I left the house, did a stint in the business world, and then shortly after that, became a preacher myself. So the majority of my life, I have lived in the proverbial Christian fishbowl. Everybody wants to see the preacher's kid, and they all want to see the preacher kid mess up. Or they don't say that, but they're watching to see if the preacher's kids will mess up. Then when you're a preacher, everybody's watching. They want to see how you act and react. And nobody ever tells you that they go to your church until after you get mad in traffic. And then they're like, oh, hey, I go to your church. So I get that. I've lived in the fishbowl, comfortable there, and been there since I was a little kid. Having been a preacher's kid and now a preacher, I have seen pretty much every type of Protestant church service that you can imagine that happened in North America, from really big to really small. My dad was a church planter, so I remember the church planting days. And we met in a retail center, and the kids' church was in the unfinished part of the retail center. And so there was rebar, and a good Sunday was if a kid did not get impaled by rebar. Like, hey, don't. So that was all the way to big church, cameras, high-def screens, and everywhere in between. I've seen pastors rise to fame and stardom and then fall because of a moral failure or financial failure. I've seen mega churches grow really, really fast and then shrink almost just as fast because of something. I've experienced both the kindness and the evil of the human heart. I've experienced the good and the not so good of church life. And what I'm here to tell you is that the only constant in my faith personally, is my walk with Jesus. Churches come and go, preachers come and go, teachers, leaders, models, this type of worship, that type of worship, all of that stuff comes and goes. But the only constant in my life has been my walk with Jesus. I trusted him when I was 6 years old in a little family room, knelt there on the family room couch. And ever since then, all the way till now, the only constant has been my walk with Jesus. And so this sermon series is a very personal one for me, because I'm telling you about the Jesus that I know. So the idea is this, is that if you and I were to have coffee or to sit down over lunch, you go, hey, Chris, tell me about Jesus. This would be the conversation that we'd have. And I just personally tell you, hey, here's what he's done in my life. And I would be this excited because just coming back from Israel, it puts a whole new richness and depth on it. And so the idea is, let me tell you about the Jesus that I know. And so if you can for a minute, for the next several weeks, all of your preconceived notions about churches, pastors, leaders, teachers, Christians in general, if you can put those aside for a minute and just listen with an open mind about the Jesus that I know, my hope for this series is that it would inspire you to go find out the Jesus that you know. That you would hear the Jesus that I know and something would click in your mind to help you explore Jesus deeper, to understand him in a new and in a different way. I read this quote this week by a guy named J.B. Phillips. He was a Bible scholar out of the London area, wrote books and different commentaries I study. And this quote just really sets up where I want to go today. He says this. He says, of course, I had a deep respect, indeed a great reverence for the conventional Jesus Christ whom the church worshiped. But I was not at all prepared for the unconventional man revealed in these terse gospels. Oh, of course, I get the conventional Jesus that the church worshiped. But when he dove into the Gospels, there's this unconventional man that he began to know and to understand. And that's what I want to tell you about the Jesus that I know. Brianna, when we got back from the trip of Israel, she said, I've always understood that Jesus is fully God and fully man, but walking in Israel helped me understand the human side of Jesus in a new, in a richer, deeper way. And I'm going to tell you this, and you might disagree with me, and we can talk about it afterwards, but as I've studied the Gospels, and as I've studied the life of Jesus, and especially after I went to Israel and walked where he walked and saw what he saw, personally speaking, I think if I had lived 2,000 years ago and been around the time of Jesus, I think he and I would have been best friends. Now, you might disagree. No, I would be best friends with him. I don't know. I mean, he liked to fish and he liked to, barbecue and that kind of stuff. So I think he and I'd be buds. You're going, well, he's Jesus. He'd be buds with everybody. Yes, but anyway, this is Jesus that I know, not all right? So That's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to look at this story, this really short story. But what I want to show you about this story is you see a lot of different angles of Jesus. You see his unbelievable, courageous side, knows no fear. Then you're going to see this kindness and compassion and where his heart breaks. And then you're going to see his brilliant, logical mind at work, all in an extremely tense, volatile situation that he handles with grace. If you got a Bible, grab it. Go to John chapter 8. John chapter 8. We're going to pick it up in verse 1, and this is what John writes. He said, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. Now, it was just the day after a festival called the Festival of Shelters. A lot of people there in Jerusalem. He went up to the Mount of Olives, and he came back down to the temple, and he began to teach. Now, I want to show you a picture of just how far a walk it was. So go ahead and put that picture up there. Now, let me just show you my whole vacation while I got you. Just kidding. So we're on top of Mount of Olives. The Dome of the Rock back there, that would be where the temple is at. And in between us is called the Kidron Valley. So from where we're at over there is like a 20, maybe 30-minute walk, depending how slowly you take it down the hill and up the hill. So that's how far a walk it is from the Mount of Olives to the temple. So it's not like a day or a week-long journey, 20 or 30-minute walk. He's over there at the Mount of Olives, goes down and begins to teach at the temple, and something happens. Verse 3. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Let's just stop there for a second. Don't miss the fact that she was caught in the act of adultery. Not rumored about, not gossiped about, not had a reputation, literally caught in the act of adultery. And you can imagine this scene. They bring her there. She's probably screaming, crying, embarrassed. They bring her in front of Jesus and they ask a question. Verse 4, "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" Now, they were half right when it came to the law of Moses. The law of Moses did say that if they're caught in the act of adultery, yes, she should be stoned to death, but it also said the guy too. But the guy was nowhere to be found. And in fact, the religious leaders really did not care about the law of Moses in this situation. They just wanted to prove Jesus wrong. And look what happens, verse 6. They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who's never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." It's an intense scene. This is happening out in public, unfolding here in the public. Ladies caught in the act of adultery, they bring her in front of Jesus, who's teaching in a crowd. There's a crowd there, there's religious leaders. You got to imagine she's crying, screaming, embarrassed. They go, "Hey, law of Moses said to put her to death by stoning. What do you say, Jesus?" And Jesus, being cool, calm, and collected, bends down and he begins to write something in the dust. Now, people have always wondered, what did Jesus write in the dust? We don't know. I like to think he wrote the thumbs up emoji. I don't know what he wrote. He writes something, right? Writes something. They're demanding an answer. And then he stands back up and he goes, "Okay, hey, those of you who've never sinned, you go ahead and throw the first rock." And then he bends down and then draws something more. And then they begin to walk away one by one. And then he stands up again and looks at the woman there. Now, if you got to imagine, if you're this lady, The most embarrassing thing that you could ever imagine has happened. She's got to have her hands buried in her face. She's waiting for that first rock to hit because she knows what's going to happen. They hear her ask Jesus, and then Jesus pauses and he writes something, says, if you're without sin, throw the first rock. And all of a sudden, she hears footsteps walking away. And then all of a sudden, she hears the voice of Jesus that goes, "Where are your accusers?" She looks around because there's none. He goes, "I don't accuse you either. Go and sin no more." And this lady, in the most embarrassing moment, has all the religious people ready to throw rocks at her. And I don't know what your upbringing is in church, or religious circles, or your faith. But I think for many of us, our picture of churches, of pastors, of religious leaders is the rock of judgment in one hand and the Bible in the other. And this is pretty much your view because you've been talking about the Bible, and then the other hand, they've got this rock of judgment. They're guilting you, they're shaming you, and they're ready for you to just mess up. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you went there. I can't believe you dated them. And they've got the rock of judgment just ready to pelt you. And you're there and you're just cringing. And if we were sitting down over coffee, I would simply tell you this, is that the Jesus that I know doesn't throw rocks. The Jesus that I know isn't standing there going, "Go ahead and mess up. Like, you slept with them, you did that, you went to that part." I can't believe. The Jesus that I know doesn't throw rocks. And if your image of pastors or teachers or churches is that image, man, I'm deeply sorry for that. And you probably have every right to think that depending on your circumstance. But the Jesus that I know, the Jesus that I see in the Gospels, he's not the one to pick up the rock and throw it. In fact, the only one that could have thrown rocks didn't. And Jesus said, "Let the one who's never sinned go ahead and throw the first stone." The only one in that circle that could have done that was Jesus. And he goes and offers the lady a second chance. Now don't miss this. Jesus did not excuse the sin. He did not condone the sin. He didn't go, "Well, it's not." He didn't do that, but he forgave it. And he offered grace, display for all to see. And here's what I want you to grasp from this simple little story, depending on where you're at, but I want you to understand to embrace grace for you and for them. Embrace grace for you and for them. Let me just talk about for you for a minute. Because I think it's easy to read the story and go, "Man, that's fantastic." But I want you to put yourself there in the woman's spot. There when she's in the middle. Now, I want you to think about something for a minute. Now, if I were you, I would not move for like the next 30 seconds after what I'm about to say, okay? Because it'll get really awkward. But I want you to think about the darkest, most shameful sin you have ever committed. Don't move. Probably wouldn't even breathe, okay? Bring that to the top of your mind. Now, nobody in this room knows about it. I don't know about it. Person sitting next to you probably doesn't know about it. But imagine if I brought you up here on stage and I stood you right here and I go, "Let me tell you what they've done." And I just go ahead and air out all your dirty laundry. Like everything, those things that you suppress so far down that you think nobody knows. I go, "Hey, let me tell you what they've done." How embarrassed you would be, how shameful you would be, how much guilt would be upon you. And Jesus is there, this lady, all her dirty laundry is out for all the world to see. And Jesus shows her grace. When it comes to you and grace in your life, I just want you to remember this simple idea. Don't let what you did keep you from what Jesus wants you to do. Don't let what you did keep you from what Jesus wants you to do. You know what? You absolutely messed up. It was a sin. It's regretful. It's shameful. It's a mistake. It's something that you wish you could take back. The lady sinned. She messed up. But don't let what you did keep you from what Jesus wants you to do. Because here's the thing. Satan knows how shameful that makes you feel. And so the next time you're about to take a step forward in faith, do something that Jesus has called you. Take that step in faith of leadership, or the next step that Jesus is calling you in obedience to him. He's going to go, Remember that thing that you did, that thing that you tried, that person that you dated? Remember that thing that you said or left unsaid? And all of a sudden, he'll bring that guilt and that shame all the way back going, you can't move forward because of fill in the blank. Embrace grace for yourself and don't let what you did, as awful as it was, as sinful as it, keep you what Jesus wants you to do. You sinned, embrace the grace and forgiveness of Jesus and move forward. And Jesus tells her, he goes, listen, go and sin no more. He didn't tell her, well, listen, what you did is pretty shameful. If you could just, go into hiding and just maybe no one will bother you for the rest of your life. He goes, no, go and sin no more. The grace and forgiveness of Jesus Christ covers the sin, covers the regret, covers the shame. Now you go and sin no more. Just because you did something doesn't mean disqualifies you from what God is calling you to do. Now, in our household, I like to think that we're pretty healthy when it comes to food-wise with our kids. But last week, my parents were in town. Oh, you got the same issue with your grandparents, I see. So before we leave out of town, we try to be, good parents, and we stock up on healthy snacks in our pantry. Granola bars, rice cakes, yummy. Things like that, healthy snacks that we know we're going to be gone. We tell the kids, listen, here's all the snacks, just kind of pace yourself, but it should last you a week. Thanks, no problem. We get back, every single one of those healthy snacks are still in the pantry. So we ask our kids, hey, did y'all eat snacks? Oh, we ate snacks. Did you eat these? Nope. And now we press them a little bit. We sat them down on a chair and put a spotlight on them and go, what kind of snacks did you eat? And they did not break. To my mom and dad that are watching, they did not throw you under the bus, all right? I just wanted you to know that. What kind of snacks did you eat? Oh, just things, just whatever Pops and Grandma bought. Well, like what? And they were just dead silent, except for Kara. Well, Pops, every time he picked us up in carpool line, always had ice cream. Every day, Dad. It was amazing. And then Daniel being the oldest, well, Dad, it was like maybe 2 or 3 days. It wasn't that big of a deal. And so the whole week, they pretty much lived off of, ice cream and chocolate with, Chick-fil-A French fries for a health food. For a week. And it was just so weird because growing up, I was talking to somebody earlier this week, growing up, my parents were pretty healthy. Like I ate pretty healthy food growing up. I don't know what happens to grandparents. It's like, well, we've raised one set of kids. We're done. I don't know what goes on, but they just destroy the food and the diet with our kids. Now, we get back, we see that they did not eat health food at all while we were gone. So we don't come back and go, well, we might as well throw it out all the window. It's lasted 11 years, but, whatever. Let's just live off of junk food. No, we tell people we have to detox our kids from grandparents is what we have to do. This is a carrot. This is broccoli. No, that's a word in our vocabulary. That's the things we have to do. We don't go, well, you've had a week worth of junk food, might as well continue. No, you get back to what we know that they need to do. Yes, you've messed up. Yes, there's a sin. Yes, there's regret, but you embrace the grace and forgiveness of Jesus and move forward. Embrace the grace, accept the forgiveness, and move forward. Don't let what you did keep you from what Jesus wants you to do. Embrace grace for you, but also embrace grace for them. Now, here's what's interesting and really almost sad and sickening a little bit in this story. You've got Jesus, and you've got the woman. Then you've got the religious leaders ready to pelt her with rocks. But then you've got another group. You've got the bystanders that are standing in apathy toward this woman. And nobody says or does anything. Nobody runs to this woman's rescue except for Jesus. Now, don't miss this. They had just finished celebrating the Festival of Shelters, an 8-day-long festival that reminds them of God's rescuing them out of the hands of the Egyptians. God rescuing them. Nobody rescued the woman. Like nobody stepped forward and goes, well, maybe we should hear her side of the story, or maybe we should ask her a few questions. Nobody did anything except for Jesus. And I think oftentimes we're not the people with the rocks in our hands. That's not us. We're not going to throw judgment, but we might be the people standing on the sideline going, ooh, what's going to happen? We don't ever rush to their different. Nobody goes, hey, let me show you to listen to Jesus. The people had been listening to Jesus teach. They were familiar with Jesus. They knew about miracles and signs and wonders that he had done. And nobody goes, hey, maybe you two should talk. See, we want to embrace grace for us, but when it comes to embracing grace for somebody else, it's a little messy. And what I want you to grasp, and not just in your head, but in your heart, is to trust that Jesus can repair the brokenness and the messiness of other people's lives. Trust that Jesus can repair the brokenness and the messiness and the sins and the regrets of other people's lives, and do your very best to introduce them to Jesus. You know, we're certainly not the church that's going to throw rocks. I mean, I don't think walk in here and feel judgment, but I certainly don't want to be the church that just stands by the side and goes, ooh, let's see what happens. We talk about more life change. We like more life change for us and when it grace and forgiveness, but what about more life change for them? What about going to the woman going, hey, you and Jesus should talk. But when it comes to brokenness and messiness, oftentimes we're like the older son in the parable of the prodigal son. When the prodigal returns home and the older guy's ticked off because he gets a party and he doesn't. See, we're not going to be the ones throwing rocks, but we might just be the ones with our arms crossed going, let's see what happens. You've messed up. Your sin's too far gone, too far right. It's too messy. And so we just kind of back away from the mess. And you see Jesus runs toward it. I mean, there, rocks are getting ready to hurl, and there's Jesus and the woman. Nobody does anything except for Jesus. Trust that Jesus can repair and clean up the brokenness and messiness of people's lives and give them a chance. Give them a chance. How many chances? As many chances as Jesus would give them. Second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance. If they are still breathing, if there's still a heartbeat and a pulse in their life, there's still a chance for Jesus to redeem and restore their souls. It's not up to you and it's not up to me to say they're too far gone. If you look around the world, your parents, your friends, your in-laws, your co-workers, it's a broken, broken world. But there is a rescuer and a savior, and the Jesus that I know runs towards the messiness and the brokenness and can restore it. You know what makes Chip and Joanna Gaines so awesome? Yeah, they've got unbelievable TV personalities, but really what makes them awesome is that Chip and Joanna Gaines are amazing at what they do. They're extremely talented at taking a broken, foreclosed on, dilapidated house, and in like 45 minutes time, they pull it past, like, it's amazing, pull it open. It's like this beautiful home. We love it because they take something broken and messed up and they make it beautiful. They've taken silos in Waco, Texas, and making them a tourist attraction. Like people from thousands of miles are driving to see where grain was stored. You realize, like I'm from San Antonio, Texas. We did not vacation to Waco. What was in Waco was Baylor University and cows. That was it. He just didn't go there. But they have become so good at taking broken, dysfunctional things. And any show on HGTV or those shows where they take old cars, broken and messed up, and restore them and make them great. Take old furniture and sand it down and refinish it and make it new. We love that. We love seeing houses restored, cars restored, furniture restored. But when it comes to human beings, our patience tends to run out. When it comes to the broken, dysfunctional, there in the middle, embarrassed person, we're going, man, I'm not so sure. And we kind of back away and we become the crowd full of apathy versus Jesus that runs to her rescue. Yes, embrace grace for you, but also embrace grace for them. The Jesus that I know, full of courage, kindness, and compassion, brilliant logical reasoning. To be there in the middle, you got to get this scene. Crowded, crying, screaming, ready to put this lady to death. And Jesus just goes, great. If you've never sinned, go ahead and throw the first rock. And one by one, they walk away. And in this very tense scene, the grace of Jesus Christ is on display for all to see. The Jesus that I know is full of grace and kindness and mercy. And my hope and my prayer for you and for me is that we would embrace grace not only for us, but for those around us. That's the Jesus that I know. And I share that with you because I want you to discover Jesus for yourself in a new and deeper and richer way. Because over these next several weeks, if you come and you listen, you're going to hear about the Jesus that I know. You're going to hear, man, just how he's changed my life from 6 years old all the way till now. And this is the Jesus that I've experienced personally, and I've seen it. And I want you to experience that for yourself. I don't want you to discover Jesus in a new and a fresh way. And so here's what we've done, just a very tangible thing. If you've got this, you should have been handed this on your way, and if not, get it on your way out. This is an old-fashioned thing called a bookmark. What it is from now until Easter, we've taken the Gospel of Luke and broke it into daily readings. So it's 6 days a week, and then you come to church on Sunday. And starting tomorrow all the way till Easter, you'll completely read the Gospel of Luke. Luke is a doctor, writes a very detailed account of the life and ministry of Jesus. I want you to discover Jesus in a new and fresh way for yourself. And so it's a very simple reading plan. You wake up, you look at it, what's the date, and you read that chapter of Luke. And just go, Lord, I want to experience you in a new and a fresh way. I want to see the Jesus that I know. Not the one that Chris knows, but I want to see the Jesus that I know. You go, Jesus, I want to see you in a new and a fresh way all the way between now until Easter. And I'm confident that you will experience Jesus full of kindness and grace and forgiveness and courage. Not just a guy on a story or on a felt board or somebody that the church talks about, but the Jesus that you can personally know. I'll finish with this, and it's a quote by one of my favorite preachers that I listen to. It's a guy named Chuck Swindoll. Chuck is in his 80s, been preaching, ministering for nearly 60 years, and has a church in Dallas. This idea of embrace grace, man, I got from him. It was on one of his recent podcasts, and he describes the grace of God 100 times better than I could ever explain it. But there's this line that he says on his podcast describing grace, and I think it ties everything together perfectly. He says, the life of grace is a life of absolute, joyful liberty and freedom to obey Christ. The life of grace is a life of absolute, joyful liberty and freedom to obey Christ. The Christian life is not this. The Christian life is not come to Jesus and we're just waiting for you to mess up. Now, that might be true about Christians or pastors or leaders or teachers or church people, but it's not about Jesus. It's the complete joy and freedom and liberty to obey Christ. And when you sin and when you mess up and when there's regret, you confess it, you embrace the grace and forgiveness of Jesus Christ, and you move forward in liberty and freedom to continue obeying Him. That's the good news. That's the gospel of Jesus. It's not somebody going, just mess up. It's Jesus going, follow me. Walk in joy and liberty and freedom to obey Christ. The Jesus that I know offers second chances and third chances and fourth chances and is full of grace and mercy. The question is, will you embrace it? Let me pray for us. With every head bowed and every eye closed. Man, I don't know what your story of faith is, but if we were finishing up our time today over coffee, I'd go, listen, that's the Jesus that I know. Do you want to know Him? Do you know Him? And not just a head knowledge, but man, it's a heart thing. Oh man, the Jesus I know has changed my life. And I promise you He will change your life if you'll give Him a chance. Because it is a personal relationship. It's not this stoic thing. It's not a ritualistic thing. It's a personal relationship with Jesus. If you've never experienced that, you can do that right here and right now, and you can embrace the grace and forgiveness and stop walking in that guilt and that shame that you've been carrying around for far too long. I mean, if you're ready to trust Jesus and have a personal relationship with him, just say something like this and mean it from your heart. Just say, today, Jesus, I trust you. I ask your forgiveness for all my sins. I place my faith in you and what you did on the cross and the fact that you rose from the dead. I embrace your grace and forgiveness and your salvation. Fill me with your Spirit and help me to follow you all the days of my life. Lord, I pray for all of us. Lord, as I've shared the Jesus that I know, my prayer is that everyone here and watching online would experience the Jesus that they know. Oh, Lord, between now and Easter specifically, would you impress on their hearts? Would you allow them to experience you in a new and a fresh and a rich and a deeper way, Jesus, the Jesus that they know? We ask these things in your name. Amen.